today I am going to show you a little demonstration on how I create my small vase arrangements. So these are the kind of arrangements that you would have maybe in the centre of a table, or on a really pretty window ledge in your kitchen, or on a sideboard somewhere in your dining room. A place where you can kind of show off the best flowers of the season out of your garden right now. So to begin with, I'm going to kind of show you what vessel I'm going to be using and the kind of mechanics behind how I create a vase arrangement, and then I'm going to talk you through a few of the flowers that I'm using today, and then I'll begin. So the vessel that I've chosen is a small ceramic footed bowl. Small footed bowls are generally my kind of go-to for vase arrangements. You kind of get that elegant shape that you're then just going to add to with the flowers. It gives you lots of space to work with, and it's also still stable enough that it's not going to kind of wobble around when you start putting taller or larger flowers in. Now I always use a pin holder or a flower frog. A nice kind of heavy metal version with really sharp spikes is always best. You kind of want to make sure they're as sharp as possible, which is lethal for fingers but perfect for flowers. And then I'm going to attach this to the bottom of my bowl with just some floor fix tape. This is the best thing to use. I generally will leave my frogs in as well if I can. If I fix them sturdy enough, then they should kind of last for, you know, a good few arrangements, so that you're not kind of wasting too much of this. You can use chicken wire as well if you'd like to, if that's kind of a process that you're familiar with. I would generally add chicken wire on top of a table centre vase arrangement like this, but I do sometimes like to just use a frog. I think you kind of get a slightly lighter area display because you're not so worried about hiding all of your mechanics. So now that I've got my frog secure in my vessel, I'm going to just top that up with water, nice and full. At this point I want to make sure that whatever stems I put in, they're going to be touching the water. So generally when I start to make an arrangement, I'm going to kind of start with the foliage. The foliage is going to help create my shape. So this is the point where I sort of start to think about what kind of shape I want to create, whether I want to kind of create something like low and long, or if I want to create something with a bit more height and a little bit more drama. So I think today I'm going to go for kind of slightly asymmetrical with some height, but keeping some trailing elements down to the one side, because I've got some really beautiful golden vines here that they're just starting to turn with their autumn colour. Flower wise, I kind of don't have like a recipe for how many flowers to need. It's one of those things where I generally pick as much as I can, as much as is looking good that works in my colour scheme, and then if there's a few leftovers, they get put into bud vases to go around, or I will just kind of cram everything in as much as possible, so that you've got loads of colour and loads of texture and loads of shape going on. So everything's really kind of starting to slow down in my growing patch at the moment. I haven't got a huge amount left, but what I have got left is lots of the really rich autumn colours, which is perfect for this kind of autumn bowl that we're going to create today. So I've got lots of really lovely Rebecchias, some really lovely like Sahara varieties. I've got a few really pretty calendulas left. There's a few garden roses that are still hanging on after all the rain and the bad weather that we've had. So the roses that I've got are Julias and Mocha Rosa, which are those two kind of muddy pink colours, which I think complement those kind of rich oranges and golden yellows really well. Then I've got a few dahlias, a couple of other Rebecchias over this side, a few little zinnias. These are little Aztec mixed varieties and burgundy varieties, really lovely. A I've got a few pieces of jasmine. This is the kind of fresh growth on my jasmine, so it's got that really lovely kind of brown tinge that it gets. And then I've got a few final sweet peas, which is really lovely, which is that really lovely kind of purple colour that's going to complement everything really well. So yeah, that's just kind of a rough idea of the kind of things that we're going to be using. Foliage wise, I've got a little bit of smoke bush foliage that is just starting to turn. I've got some sanguisorba leaves again that are turning into the autumn colour, and then I've got a little bit of red hot water pepper, which is a really nice one to use. This is great, this lasts really well in water. And then I've also got some Scottish lovage foliage, which again is really nice because it's kind of got a slight tinge to the colour of it. So to begin with, we are going to start by adding our foliage in. So the first foliage that I'm going to start putting in is going to be the first few pieces that are going to help kind of hide little bits of my vessel, or if you're kind of using chicken wire and you've got some tape that you need to hide, this is kind of the area where I'd start first. You want to kind of make sure that you hide any mechanics at the beginning so that you're not kind of like trying to kind of move things and cram things in when you get further down the line and things might shift and move. So I'm going to go for a few kind of pieces that are going to like hang over a little bit, I think, at the front. So I've got a few little bits of smoke bush I'm going to start adding in. So I will spin this a little bit as well so that I can kind of check what I'm making, that you can see the best side of it at all times. So I'm going to just start using the pin holder. So this is great at the beginning, where you can kind of really anchor these first few stems in to help you kind of get the exact shape that you want to. So next I'm going to add this kind of really lovely autumny coloured sanguisorba leaf. So this is kind of bringing a little bit of height up here. I'm going to come lower. This is the kind of side that I want to focus adding the vines things into, but to begin with right now I'm just going to kind of build from that point. So I want to mirror the sanguisorba on this side as well. They've got a really great kind of, they're quite front facing, so they're quite good to angle for their best side. It's a really lovely, very brown piece, so I'm going to add that in as well. A little bit more, a larger piece of smoke bush here. I'm just trimming this one down. So I feel like I want to bring this one in. So we're just going to build on that at this point. So this is where I keep adding more foliage in. Not too much. I don't want to make it like really heavy. I don't want to kind of overfill it with foliage. I want to still make sure that there's lots of room for lots of flowers and lots of kind of interest and texture from the flowers rather than just from the foliage. Add some of this Scottish lovage in at the back here. So yeah, you can kind of see that shape starting to form already, which is good. I still have a few more bits of sanguisorba, so this is again a really nice tall piece, so I want to come in kind of quite central. It probably feels a little bit upright right now, but once you kind of start adding other elements in and some more flowers that are going to be similar sort of height, then it won't look so upright. Cut a nice kind of shorter piece of sanguisorba for the back here so that you can see the colour through, but also I do want a bit of interest at the back. I don't want it to just be a fully front facing piece. So yeah, you can kind of start to see that shape building already. I think probably I might start adding a couple of flowers in. I feel like there's still space for some more foliage. I've got some really lovely kind of really speckled weather damaged heuchera leaves that I think would be really nice kind of down this front area. So I may start adding those soon, but I kind of want to get a couple of flowers in first to help me then build my shape from there. So a lot of people kind of go for focal flowers and then filler flowers and things like that, whereas I kind of take the approach that all flowers can be all things. You don't have to have a kind of large, big, blousy dahlia and that's your focal flower. To me, one of the smaller Rebecchias could be a focal, and the dahlia could be kind of that bright colour that's nestled in lower down to help bring kind of depth and colour throughout the whole arrangement. So I'm going to go for one of these really vibrant orange dahlias. Let's just choose. So this one's got like a really nice shape to it. Naturally it's going to kind of lean, so I'm going to keep that one to use as a slightly more focal one, but this one I'm going to cut nice and short, probably a little bit shorter than that, and I want to nestle it right down low in between the foliage. I don't mind if some of the leaves cover it. I'm going to cut it even shorter than that, I think, because to me it's just about being that bright orange colour, nice and low and deep down in the arrangement. And the same with some of these darker ones as well. So I'm going to add one of these lovely Karma Chalk dark dahlias, and I'm going to come in at the other side, similar thing, nice and low, nestling it sort of behind the leaves of the foliage. So it's kind of bringing those colours deep inside the arrangement rather than just kind of being like lots of big heads popping out. And then from there you can kind of build your layers on top. You can start adding some more texture and some smaller flowers on top of that. So probably the next thing that I'm going to start adding is some of these really pretty Rebecchias. Again, I want different heights. I want to create like that staggered layered effect. So I'm going to just start adding a couple in, and you'll see that the more that get added in, the more you kind of lose that bold shape of those large dahlias that I've already put in. I want to follow the line of the foliage as well with some flowers, so I'm looking for flowers that are kind of already going to do that for me, rather than me kind of forcing a flower into that shape. I want to pick flowers that are already on that angle. So like this Rebecchia is going to be really great. We're kind of following that line of the Sanguisorba there, and just using the pinfrog as the anchor, still kind of finding space in there. There will get to a point where it's quite full and there might not be any spikes kind of left for you to stab into, but at that point you should have enough in there that everything else is going to create the structure that any of your additional flowers need. So just going to keep adding a few more Rebecchia. They're such good colours. They're kind of balancing the colours a little bit for me right now. So they're kind of bringing in the rusty oranges and the kind of rich burgundies and the slightly kind of warm yellows, which helps to kind of tie everything together. You need those kind of in-between flowers where they're kind of like muddying the lines between what colours they are. So are they kind of like a dark red, or are they kind of even a deep pink? And they're kind of meeting in the middle between all of the other colours that you have going on. So I've still got quite a few of these, some really pretty stem shapes. So again, I'm going to angle these. I think actually this guy would be lovely over here. So they're helping to exaggerate the shapes that I'm already making. And I want to come kind of quite far out the front as well, so we're going to add this one, so it's kind of sticking right out like that. Okay, so next thing that I think I'm going to add is the heuchera leaf that I mentioned before, because I feel like this is the point where I want to get them in the right place at the front. So they're going to help kind of hide my vessel a little bit, but this is such a pretty vessel that I don't mind if quite a lot of it's on show. But if maybe you haven't got a really kind of decorative vase yet, or you kind of only have something that you're not so keen on, then things like heuchera leaves and other large leaves, so like fern leaves or something like the Scottish lovage, or larger flowers you can use like low down at the front to help kind of mask some of the vessel. So yeah, you can kind of see my shape starting to build, which is really good. So next thing I'm adding is some of these really pretty little calendulas. There's just a few of these left on my plot at the moment. They're really nice. Again, they're that kind of like adding a slightly lighter colour to the arrangement. They've got kind of like a creamy tone in with the pink, which is really good. Strip away some of the green. So, the next flower that I'm going to start adding in is, I think I'm going to start adding a few of the roses in. Now, I've only got a couple because, like I said before, they don't necessarily have to be my focal flower. I don't think you really need kind of a rose or a dahlia or kind of one of those main varieties of flowers to be your focal flowers in an arrangement like this. So they're just going to, again, be some little bits of colour. They're going to help kind of soften those autumn colours and kind of bring a slightly warmer peachy pink colour into the palette. So I'm just going to add this one almost on top of that original dahlia that I put in. Like I said, I'm not bothered about hiding it. It's just there for a colour reference deeper in. Got another really pretty pale Julia rose that I'm going to add in there. See how that's. That one actually I think needs to come more forward. So we're going to bring that one a little bit closer to the front. And then this slightly taller one. Still got lots of green on. I quite like this bud with the fresh growth on, so I think I'm going to leave that on, and that's going to kind of be part of my shape and my kind of colour story that's going to happen. So I'm just cutting it on a really sharp angle, so that, because it's slightly thicker than some of the other stems that I've been using, so I want to make sure that I get it into that frog nice and tightly, so that it's not going to wobble around or move at all. It's going to stay exactly in the position that I want it to. Unlike this little calendula at the back here, that's falling all over the place. Let's just get him in. So you can kind of see, looking kind of nice and full around here. I feel like I still have some gaps in these areas, so I definitely want to add more flowers. I want to add a few other shapes and textures now. I feel like I probably kind of got enough Rebeckias and with the calendulas in there as well, because they're a similar sort of shape. They're doing kind of a similar sort of thing. So I think the next thing I'm going to add is maybe a few of the sweet peas. I'm going to add a slightly different colour going on, but again, it's being picked up by some of the tones that are in the Rebecchias that are in there. So as this is a really nice tall one, I'm going to come in kind of towards the back, similar sort of angle to that rose. Some nice short ones I'm going to kind of put lower down in the side here. Again, this is a really nice, like, long arching sweet pea, so I'm going to extend that line out even more that I've already got kind of going on over there. I think maybe it needs to just be a touch shorter. I don't want it to draw away from this lovely Beccia here. Yeah, so you see by kind of stretching this line out here, I've created more space here where I can add even more additional flowers, which is really great. So I think probably the next thing I'm going to add is, I've actually got some really lovely nasturtiums, so I think we'll go with some nasturtiums. A tangle. Now I don't want the green of the leaves of the nasturtiums because that green isn't really going to go with the colours that I've got going on. So I'm just going to snip off all the green and just use the flower head on its own. Don't mind if it dangles down as long as it's kind of face forward. And then I've got some really lovely ladybird rose variety. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. So I want those to kind of be front and centre. Again, they've got a bit of green on. I'm going to keep a little bit on just because they're quite small, quite pretty little leaves. Nice and upright, which is really good. You can kind of see it really well, which is lovely. And then a couple of these little like dainty dahlias I'm going to add in. Again, over on the side where I've kind of created more room for more flowers. I'm just building on that initial shape that you started off with just the foliage. You just want to keep adding to that shape that you create. That's why it's kind of important at the very early stage that you feel kind of happy with your foliage shape that you've made, because kind of you are going to just build on that from that point. Yeah, so get that guy a little bit lower. So everything's quite front facing, which is nice. I quite like it. I think that works quite well for where I'm imagining this piece to be placed. Like I said, you will see the back, so I want to make sure that I'm adding a few things into the back. So this is the back right now, which is pretty, but I feel like it needs a little bit of colour. So I'm going to add in another nice dark dahlia, quite low, that kind of rich chocolatey brown colour. Another of the sweet peas, because they're really, again, a really lovely colour and works really well with that kind of chocolatey brown. Add one a little bit lower as well, and then I've got a couple of calendulas left. I've got a really lovely kind of goldeny orange coloured one, so I'm going to add that in as well. We'll spin this in a minute so that you can see it. So that kind of is filling my back out a little bit. I have got another gap here that I still feel like needs to be filled, so I will do that. But while I've got it facing that way, I'm just checking over my front, where I can see I've got kind of a little bit of a hole happening here. So I think I'm going to add something with a bit of texture in there. So I've got some pretty grasses here. They've gone like a really lovely red, deep red colour as they're starting to go over. So I'm going to add that in there, and it probably needs to be balanced a little bit more, so I'm going to add another in the back here. I kind of don't really have a rule of like only 3s or only 5s. It's kind of whatever works visually, so which is kind of something that you'll be able to kind of step back, and look, and if you feel like two things right next to each other works really well visually because they're maybe at slightly different heights or slightly different depths within the arrangement, then that's definitely fine. Yeah, there's definitely no real set rules. I love this little bit of jasmine that I've got, so I definitely want to put this in. So this is probably going to be my really exaggerated height over on this side. And then I've got a few shorter pieces. Again, another foliage, but it's a different foliage, slightly more kind of textured, a little bit lighter, bringing slightly different colours to the arrangement. So I'm just going to like layer those on top a little bit. Kind of go for one front and centre, which is really nice, and then kind of one sort of near that nasturtium. So I've popped one here, here, and then just down here at the front, so you can kind of see that it's like balancing those colours throughout. I kind of feel like I'm sort of getting to the point where I feel like it's full enough. I do want to put a few more flowers in. I'm going to go for a couple of these little zinnias because they've got really nice movement. I want to make sure that I keep this gap here though. I want to keep this kind of space. I don't want it to turn into everything being like really similar heights. I'm going to add a couple of zinnias at the back as well, just in that gap that I pointed out earlier, just to make sure that there's interest going on there as well. Maybe even, no, I think another zinnia. I was going to go for a Rebecca, but I think another zinnia would be nice. A little bit more delicate. And then I still have like a tiny bit of space here that I really want to fill. So I'm going to go for, I think another dahlia, but I'm going to go for one of these like really bright cerise kind of pink ones. Because at the back here I feel like that will work. You can kind of get that bit of colour from the back of it through the front. Yeah, okay. I feel like maybe the back needs a little bit of texture as well. So we'll add a little bit of texture into the back and shape. I don't want to kind of add too much in because I don't want to detract from the shape that I'm creating at the front. So I've just added that little bit of jasmine in there, which I think is going to make kind of quite a lot of difference. I think I'm kind of nearly at the point where it's kind of full enough, where there's enough going on. At this point I would say just kind of give it a little check over, make sure you've not got any kind of obvious gaps. This is kind of the benefit from just using a frog. If I was using chicken wire as well, some of the gaps that I can see right now, I would be able to see chicken wire. So I'd be kind of very conscious of kind of cramming a load more flowers in, and maybe I'd run the risk of losing that kind of lighter area look. So yeah, I think I'm kind of nearly there. I feel like there's a bit of a gap here. There's not many flowers going on in this area here, where you can see it's mainly just foliage. So I'm going to maybe add something else there. I do have a pretty little rose left, so I might, it's not fully open yet, but just that little bit of pink behind the brown of the Sanguisorba I think will work quite nicely. And then I think probably I'll add in maybe a dahlia or maybe a couple more zinnias, even another Rebecca. Yeah, so we're just kind of trying to angle that rose so it's filling that gap. So you can see it's just sort of like filling that gap quite nicely, but I still have a bit of a space here, so I definitely want to add something else in here. I've got this pretty Rebecca that I think might work quite nicely because you're only going to kind of see it from the side on the front, and this has got quite a good shape to it. Yeah, a little bit shorter. I don't want it to be kind of sticking out so much that you're losing the really great shape that's already been created. Make sure everything's nice and secure in there. A little bit of movement. Yeah, so that's sort of filling that space nicely. I think possibly needs just one more tiny little thing nestled in. So I'm just adding one more little red Rebecca, which is not particularly noticeable, but I know that that kind of colour story is then being kind of continued throughout all of it, and that little air space that you've got is being filled. I still have a tiny bit of a gap at the back, so I'm going to just add, I think I've got this really nice kind of almost neon pink foliage that I'm going to just add that in there. Another bit next to it, that fills it out really nicely at the back. It needs a tiny bit of texture of something at the back, so I do have another one of the grasses that I put in at the front, so I'm just going to cut that a little bit shorter and have that kind of sticking out along with this heuchera flower. So these are really great. Heucheras are one of my absolute favourite things to use in arrangements. They're just kind of so useful, from table centres to like wedding work, like buttonholes and things like that, to kind of the flowers you can use, create kind of that airy, grassy almost texture. Just so good, and they look good pretty much all year round as well, which is great. Yeah, so I feel like I'm pretty much there. So I think the last thing that I'm going to add in is the bit of vine. Now I've left this kind of to this very last point because it would, if I'd put it in earlier, it would have been an absolute nightmare of me spinning it round and round. So I can now add this in, which I might just pop round to the front. Another piece a little bit further back. Now if this is going to be sat on like a window ledge or something, then this is going to look absolutely beautiful, kind of curled round a candlestick that you've got next to it, or hanging down off the ledge, or again on a table if it's going to be your central table piece, then kind of the vine stretched out along the table in between the place settings. Really pretty touch, really simple, really pretty. Works really nicely. So yeah, there you have it, my kind of finished autumnal table bowl. Full of colour, full of texture, kind of really celebrating October flowers and the colours and the movement that you get with that, created with really minimal ingredients and really minimal